The Wood County Historical and Preservation Society is keeping history alive at the Phelps-Tavenner House in Wood County. The Tavenner House served as the first Wood County courthouse. Our Abigail Hines sat down with a local historian to learn more about the house's past.
Colonel Hugh Phelps built the first brick house in Wood County at the turn of the 19th century. That house sits just off Camden Avenue in Parkersburg. Community members have donated the furniture and decorations that fill every room over the years. In 2015, the Wood County Historical and Preservation Society bought the house, becoming only the 6th owner since it was built.
The stairs went up and twisted.
Librarian Diana Hill is part of the team helping preserve the house. Hill works in the resource barn, which is full of documents and photographs of past local residents.
If someone knows something about any family at all in the area, we would love to have their information. That's what we are building with is people who have done their family histories and have been kind enough to share them with us.
Hill says these documents date back to when settlers were moving into the area. She hopes those resources will help answer visitors' questions.
So if you have an interest in a specific family or any historical happening in the area, we will have newspaper clippings. Probably we'll try our best to find something about your family, that sort of thing. So we're very happy and honored that people continue to bring us things that are no longer of use to them, but will be to someone down the road.
The Tavenner House was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1982. Today, it welcomes guests to step inside and step back in time. Reporting from Parkersburg, I'm Abigail Hines with WTA.